This coronavirus that they keep talking about is spreading immensely all over the planet. And this particular message is part 2 of the message that I was giving out a while ago pertaining to false information. That's how I'm going to label this one. False information B, false information A that I just got through recording. So this is a tag on pertaining to this coronavirus that is now locking in to the Earth's grips of becoming a major outbreak. So please, those that listen to this, do not take this lightly. Please do not take this lightly. Today is January the 26th, 2020. Listen to these responders. Please take this serious.
Pneumonia virus is using our global travel network to cross oceans, spreading through Southeast Asia, down to Australia, across to Europe, and to the United States. Now, Chinese officials say people can spread it even before they have symptoms. Well, these 15 cities in China on full or partial lockdown are considered small by Chinese standards, but Wuhan alone is bigger than New York City or London. The mayor expects confirmed cases there to rise by another 1,000. Xiaogan, with 5 million people, about the size of Abu Dhabi and Dubai put together. Well, advisors to the US Centers for Disease Control and Prevention have been frustrated with the lack of information coming from Beijing about how this virus is spreading. But even for people living in the cities on lockdown, information is reportedly very hard to come by. As you'd expect, we can connect you to Beijing right here. CNN's David Culver is in the capital for you.
China's President Xi Jinping ordering local leaders to stop the spread of the deadly coronavirus, calling it a grave situation that China is facing right now. Now, health officials seem to be responding. Sunday, they announced some extraordinary containment efforts. Those efforts include sending some 1,600 medical personnel into Hubei province, towards the epicenter of this virus. They also have already on the ground some 1,300 military and civilian medical personnel. President Xi has also asked that medical staff are protected and that supplies gets to those who need it. We have been telling you about some of the dire situations that folks are in there. Healthcare workers telling us that it feels as though they're going into battle without any armor. They're lacking hazmat suits, lacking goggles, lacking protective face masks. Well, the health officials on Sunday here in China announcing that they plan to step up production immediately of some of those hazmat suits. They say they need an estimated 100,000 hazmat suits each day. Currently, production is only at 13,000. So they're bringing in workers in the midst of this Spring Festival holiday to start up production once again. Meantime, this as tens of millions of people find themselves in what seems to be a widening lockdown zone.
57.2 million people under lockdown in China. Give or take around 60,000 or 60 million people. Keep in mind, I believe there's population in China is over 1 billion. Something like 1.2 or 1.4 billion people in China. So that is covering, say, 60 million. That's covering almost half, right at half, at least a fourth of what's on lockdown today. And if it continues to spread like it's spreading, whenever you hear of these orders being given by their parliament of going from 13,000 hazmat suits being made a day to 1,300 hazmat suits being made a day to 1,000 hazmat suits being made a day, every day, That tells you the severity and the level of severity that this truly has become. This is an outbreak that I don't know that they're going to be able to contain it in one particular area, especially if they're going to allow for people that's in China to get on airplanes and leave, because it's basically going to not just be in their system pertaining to their lungs, pertaining to their blood system, but it's also going to be in their clothes. It's also going to be on their shoes. It's going to be under their shoes. It's going to be in their hair. This is a problem that now the world is fixing, it looks like, to have to address. Please listen. This is extremely, extremely cautious.
And the folks there are describing a very difficult situation of uncertainty and unease.
I woke up feeling quite desperate, sad, angry. Most of this is because of a lack of information and a lack of knowing what's going on. My mother's worried about me. I love her. She's 88 years old. My sister let her know that things I'm doing here. And I don't want her to worry anymore. And I'd like to see her.
U.S. officials estimate there are about 1,000 U.S. citizens within the city of Wuhan. And according to the U.S. Embassy of China's website, they plan to charter a plane essentially on Tuesday that would take citizens out of Wuhan to San Francisco. Now, citizens have to apply for spots on that aircraft because seats are limited. But it's not only the U.S. that's trying to get its citizens out of that zone. In fact, the U.K., France, Japan, Korea, Jordan, all making similar attempts to ease the burden of those who are within that lockdown zone. David Culver, Beijing.
David, of course, was in Wuhan earlier last week, back in Beijing at this point, but has a real sense of what is going on the ground there. Let's get a medical look at this. Longtime advisor to the US Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, you'll have probably heard of it as the CDC, Dr. William Schaffner joining us now. And Dr. Schaffner, the Chinese announcement that the virus can be spread even before symptoms appear, you say, is a game changer. How so?
It's a game changer, Becky, because that means that transmission, the contagiousness of the patient, is so much more evident. There's a longer period of time where that person can spread the disease. And if they can spread the disease for days before they become sick, then just quarantining those sick people is not a sufficient strategy. Actually, this is a way the virus would love to spread from person to person. If normal, healthy people can spread the virus before they become sick.
How concerned are you about what we've just learned in the last hour or so, that authorities locally to where this virus, it seems, began in Wuhan, are suggesting that as many as 1,000 more cases are likely to have been or to be revealed very shortly?
Well, obviously, the number of known cases and suspected cases is growing very, very rapidly. And we would anticipate that if this is a now more contagious virus than we thought even yesterday and the day before. So spread can be really very, very rapid through close, intimate contact with someone else before you become ill.
The response to this coronavirus has been massive. I just want our viewers to get to see these images again, and I'm sure you've seen them yourself. 2 brand new hospitals going up in record time. That is, cities across the country go on lockdown and banning.
That's what alarmed me right there. Whenever I seen that the day that I woke up after the second day, and I seen China doing this right here, I knew then something's going on.
In the sale of wild animals at these.
Look at this. Look at the spread right here. I mean, you're talking about from here, and I'm sure they're going to widen it even all over to here. But you're talking about a field right here that's at least 100 acres or more. that they have brought in all these excavators and all these backhoes and bulldozers out of nowhere. In other words, they jerked these people from their original assignments, wherever that they was at, their jobs, and I'm sure it was spread all over the city of different projects that they had going on, working on roads, working on independent businesses or whatever. But they have brought in all these people from all these different areas that had to have taken at least 2 or 3, maybe 4 or 5 days, maybe even almost a week to call them up and get them, hey, get your equipment out here and get it out here now. So they had to load up on all these 18-wheelers. I don't see all the sleds pertaining to the low boys that they bring all this stuff in here on. But this is massive. What you're looking at here is massive. And this could very well be the very next thing that could be facing in the United States or in other parts of the planet. Christ said that in the last days we would see signs in the heavens and signs upon the earth such as we've never seen before. We ain't never seen no type of movement like this. And they're not only making a hospital supposedly in 6 days or 7 days or 10 days that will accommodate, I believe, 1,300, but they're making another one pretty close to it or down from it somewhere that will accommodate another few thousand people. So what they're dealing with is severe. This is severe. This is not Hollywood. This is not some sort of a made-up novel. This is really happening, folks.
Local markets. How do you rate this response, sir?
Well, this is a brand new problem, and we're learning more about it as it grows. The response has been enormous. On the scientific side, the Chinese investigators have identified the virus and spread that information around the world so that all the scientists around the world can start working on a vaccine, for example. We already have a rapid diagnostic test. That's very important. Now, getting treatment in to those folks and really determining the epidemiologic aspects of this virus. When does it become contagious? How contagious is it? How likely is it to spread to other people? Doing those kinds of investigations in a circumstance like this is really chaotic and very difficult. The CDC has advisors in place working with the Chinese Ministry of Health.
CDC.
And I will, sir, have a spokesperson from the WHO, the World Health Organization, on in the next hour. The WHO have not declared a public health emergency. Should they at this point?
Well, I would anticipate, my crystal ball says, the next time the WHO committee meets, I think it is likely that they will declare this a public health emergency of international concern.
God.
And with that, we'll leave
Lord
it there. We thank
Jesus,
you very
have
much
mercy
indeed
on us all.
for joining us. Your insight is extremely valuable. So the key takeaway.
Thank you so much.
You should be concerned about this new virus. Yes, absolutely you should. You should be taking precautions. You should not be panicking. Let me give you some context here to help you see why. The MERS virus, you'll remember that.
You see what you're looking at to the right hand of your screen right there? These are organisms, microorganisms that live in our bloodstream and in our saliva. These little things right here can come alive. And rather than help the system, it can attack the system. It can attack different organs in different parts of the body. Break down your immune system to the point that if you even so much as get a cold, it can be very fatal to you. In other words, if you're an elderly person or you're a child and you already have a weak immune system, once these organisms, once these viruses get into your system and start working, it can absolutely be dire, devastating. They're already talking about 3% mortality rate. Let's listen to what she has to say here on this, because this is really, really serious, folks.
As camel.
Let's back this up just a little bit. No.
Taking precautions.
Right,
you should not be panicking. Let me give you some context here to help you see why. The MERS virus, you'll remember that, as camel flu, is probably how you remember it, killed more than 1 in 3 people who contracted it. And remember SARS as well? Well, that had a death rate of about 1 in 10. Whereas so far, at least, this Wuhan strain is tracking at about a 3% mortality rate, far closer to the average rate of flu in general. Do stay with CNN. Of course, we will continue to update you on exactly what is going on with regard to this virus. Still to come, a plan for peace in the Middle East. Well, Jared Kushner's long-awaited proposal finally, apparently set to be unveiled. Why, my next guest says the US should set aside its ambitions for the Middle East region. That after this.
I'm Paula Newton in Montreal, and this is CNN.
Iran appears to be standing down, which is a good thing for all parties concerned and a very good thing for the world.
President Trump cooling down tensions with Iran just a couple of weeks ago. 2020 beginning with fears of war. Well, now President Trump's attention back on this roiling region of the Middle East, but this time with the purpose of peace, we are told. Spearheaded by the president's senior advisor and son-in-law, Jared Kushner, Mr. Trump, set to unveil the much vaunted Middle East peace plan in the next couple of days. Well, we've already seen the economic portion of the plan, but it's the political, intractable issues, including the matter of Palestinian statehood, that are yet to be revealed. All this coming to a head as Israel heads into its third election within a year. Both Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and opposition leader Benny Gantz are currently racing across the Atlantic to the White House to get some quality time with the US president. Meantime, the US and the Palestinians have not had any formal contact for 2 years. Well, my next guest says the US needs a, quote, sustainable Middle East strategy based on a more realistic assessment of its interests, adding that it's time to eschew never-ending wars and grandiose objectives. In a recent essay, Martin Indyk suggested the Middle East, well, is it worth it anymore to the US? He was the US Special Envoy for Israeli-Palestinian negotiations under Barack Obama, also serving as the US Ambassador to Israel under President Clinton. He's probably forgotten more about Middle East peace plans than we will ever know. Joining me now from Tel Aviv. So a fresh approach. That is what we are or have been promised, but with no real detail to boot. We are left wondering what on earth is in this, quote, deal of the century. Can you enlighten us any more?
Well, it's certainly going to be a fresh approach because I think it will be a major departure from the US policy positions adopted since 1967. There's been a consistency through every administration that leads to an exchange of territory for peace based on the 1967 lines, which predated the war, the June 67 war, with minor border rectifications. That's basically been the underpinning of the US approach. When the Palestinian issue came along and had to be addressed, then the United States supported a two-state solution to the Palestinian problem with an independent Palestinian state with its capital in East Jerusalem. And again, the state based on the 67 lines with mutually agreed swaps to make up for
the differences that Israel would presumably annex some of the territory where the settlements are based in blocks along the 67 borders and would give Israeli territory in return. So that's been the basic premise up to now. I think in the Trump peace plan, which we should bear in mind has been developed without any consultation with the Palestinian Authority, there's been no communication with them or the PLO in 2 years, has essentially been developed together with Prime Minister Netanyahu to meet most of Israel's basic requirements and shift the parameters of the two-state solution fairly dramatically in Israel's favor. So I think what we're going to see on territory, for instance, is as opposed to the 95% of the West Bank with 5% of land swaps that has been the traditional U.S. position going back to President Clinton and his parameters, I think we're likely to see something like 80% of the West Bank. The Palestinians now control 40%, so it would be an enhancement of their position, but would fall far short of their expectations.
Right. So you made a very good point. You've made it clear. You can't have a serious discussion about Israeli-Palestinian peace and only invite one side to come talk about it. The US will say, well, that's not our fault. It was the Palestinians who closed the door on us back when we opened our embassy in Jerusalem. I mean, could or should the Palestinians have done more before we got to this point?
Well, I think that the administration drove the Palestinians away from the table by the Jerusalem decision that you refer to. There was nothing in that decision for the Palestinians. It would have been relatively easy for President Trump, in announcing that he was recognizing Jerusalem as Israel's capital, to say at the same time, I also recognize that the Palestinians aspire to have their capital in East Jerusalem. But he didn't say anything like that. And indeed, as I understand it, the plan will give very limited, short shrift to Palestinian claims in Jerusalem. At most, it'll be outer suburbs and a refugee camp, and everything west of the security barrier and wall that Israel's built will be granted, as it were, in this proposal to Israel under Israeli sovereignty, which the Palestinians cannot accept. The question now, Becky, if I might suggest, is...
Yeah, that will be unacceptable to the Palestinians, of course.
Right. But the question is not whether they could have done more. I mean, then Trump punished them and cut off all their aid and so on. The question is, how do they relate to this now? Because there's a danger to them that if they reject it out of hand, which I think they're inclined to do, strongly inclined to do, that then Trump will greenlight Israeli annexation of the territory he's proposing that Israel should have in this deal of the century. And so I think the Palestinians need to be careful about how they respond so that they don't easily fall into the traditional characterization of the Palestinians always rejecting proposals, always missing an opportunity to miss an opportunity. I think it's much better if they say we're ready for negotiations.
Sure. Sorry, no, I get you. I get where you're going on that point. On the eve of President Trump's inauguration, Martin, he made it clear when it comes to foreign policy in the Middle East, Jared Kushner, his son-in-law and a real estate developer by trade, is the only man for the job as far as he's concerned. Have a listen to this.
He is so great. If you can't produce peace in the Middle East, nobody can. Okay? All my life, I've been hearing that's the toughest deal in the world to make. And I've seen it. But I have a feeling that Jared is going to do a great job. I have a feeling he's going to do a great job.
6 years ago, under President Obama, you participated in the last direct Israeli-Palestinian negotiations, of course. Those talks collapsed. There are people, including his father-in-law, who will say Jared Kushner, why not? Why is it that Jared Kushner can't provide a solution to what nobody else has been able to where nobody else has been able to succeed?
Well, it is a real estate deal at heart. Question of how much territory the Palestinians will get control of is at the heart of this issue in the West Bank, and of course it's critical for Israelis as well, not just for security reasons, but also because the right wing believes that all of the West Bank is the land that God gave to the Jews, the land of Israel, according to the Old Testament. So yes, there's that in Jared Kushner's favor, but he's gone about it with the intention of making peace between Israel and the United States, not between Israel and the Palestinians. And indeed, the fact that the plan is being brought out now, just 5 weeks before the Israeli election, in the midst of the Israeli election campaign, the only justification for that is designed to help Netanyahu win re-election. He could have easily waited 5 weeks. It would have been wise to do so. But he's not waiting. And I think the reason for that is that Netanyahu sees this as an opportunity to present himself as a great statesman. That's why he's coming to Washington tomorrow to be there with Trump as he outlines the peace plan and to tell the Israeli public this is the opportunity of a lifetime, a historic opportunity. You need me that brought you this plan together with Trump to negotiate and finalize it. And along the way to annex the Jordan Valley, which he believes that Trump will greenlight, as I said, if the Palestinians reject the plan as they're expected to do. So it's all about Israeli and American politics, because if Trump can help Netanyahu get re-elected, he expects Netanyahu to return the favor and tell his evangelical base that Trump is the greatest thing that has come along for Israel ever. So therefore, I mean, you have to be a little cynical about it. As far as Trump declaring Kushner the man who's going to make peace, we know Trump will declare that peace has been made once he announces his plan. But the fact that there'll be no Palestinians there on the podium along with him and Netanyahu makes it very clear to anybody who wants to see that this is not about making peace.
Martin, it is always a pleasure. Thank you, Martin Indyk, who recently argued that with few vital American interests still at stake, the US should finally set aside its grandiose ambitions for what is, as he described it, a chaotic region. Thank you, sir. Well, America once decried Cuba as being home to a nuclear gun targeting it. Here's the island's new president just shooting some hoops. CNN got a rare tour around the island with him. That is ahead.
I had no idea that Yahoo was going to be in the United States Monday of tomorrow. I don't know what they hope to achieve out of that. Hopefully they're sincere in this peace plan of the Middle East. But once more, if the if other leaders of that part of the region is not involved in this plan, it's really not a true plan, now is it? You got to have the Afghan forces, you got to have all these culturally divided nations that's involved in this same plan of whatever that they're talking about, if there's going to truly be peace in the Middle East. Wow.
To the United Nations, lasting some 5 hours, let me tell you, back in the depths of the Cold War. Well, Fidel Castro, of course, ruled Cuba for decades and passed the baton to his brother. But now there is a new president in town with...
Don't care nothing about hearing it. That's another nation that's been aggressive to their own people.
Horn of Africa. That story is up next.
Get a protective...
Some scenes now that are, quite frankly, biblical in scale. Apocalyptic images filling the skies in East Africa as an unprecedented locust invasion devastates the region. Billions, that is with a B, billions of desert locusts are devouring crops there at incredible rates. In Ethiopia, in Somalia, and in Kenya, that's food that, quite frankly, as you will understand, is food that people need to eat. Millions of people, in fact. So
Survival.
when the locusts go through it, there is far less food.
Their survival is being ate up by all these locusts.
In an area that's already short of it. Well, farmers struggling to protect themselves against what is, the UN says, the worst invasion of its kind in decades. Quick swing in the climate from severe drought to heavy rains helped the swarms grow to an out-of-control size. Well, Kenyan government trying to get a handle on the situation with crop spraying, but the UN warning if it's not brought under control, and soon, it could grow 400 times larger over the next few months and end up becoming a plague, spreading further to Uganda and into South Sudan. Frightening stuff. I'm Becky Anderson. That was the first hour of Connect. Well, I'll be back with another hour of news after this short break. Hope you join us.
These are all signs of the Bible coming true, pertaining to signs in the heavens and signs upon the earth, such as man has not never seen before. Plagues, droughts, wars, diseases, harsh environments. Once more, keep in mind that these people around in this area obviously didn't want peace. They didn't want true biblical global peace. And now, because of it, we're suffering the consequences on it. May God have mercy on all of them, is all I got to say. Those that was involved in this shadowing resistance upheaval. And that's exactly what it was. It was an upheaval.
Signed up for tickets at 4 a.m. This gives you an idea of how seriously people are taking this idea to leave Wuhan. All new. Live from CNN Abu Dhabi, this is Connect the World with Becky Anderson.
Tonight, Middle East peace. Well, that is the big question this hour. It's 11 a.m. in DC. It's 6 p.m. in the West Bank. Same time in Jerusalem. It is 8 at night here in Abu Dhabi on Middle East Programming Hub. I'm Becky Anderson. A very warm welcome to our show. If you are just joining us, Israel's Prime Minister and opposition leader racing to Washington ahead of what is a big announcement. On Monday, Benjamin Netanyahu and Benny Gantz are meeting with US President Donald Trump, who plans to unveil his Middle East peace plan. Well, the details of which have yet to be released, but the Prime Minister, the Israeli Prime Minister, is still behind it.
We are in the midst of very dramatic diplomatic events, but the climax is still ahead of us. In a short while, I'll leave for Washington to meet my friend, the President of the United States, Donald Trump, who will present his deal of the century. I think that an opportunity such as this comes once in history and cannot be missed.
Well, we don't know much about President Trump's peace plan since only the economic portion, of course, has been fully released. The political part, however, is the delicate portion, considering the disputed borders. Israeli opposition leader Benny Gantz calls the plan a meaningful landmark in history, although he did refuse to reveal any details. And the Israeli Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, says the plan ensures the future of Israel and is an opportunity that will not come again. Let's not forget the other side, of course. Importantly, we got to talk the Palestinians. CNN has learned the Trump administration made an attempt to speak with Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas. Two Palestinian officials tell CNN that the Trump administration sent a message through a third party to ask President Abbas if he would accept a phone call from President Trump. But the Palestinian Authority broke off all ties with the US in 2017 in reaction to President Trump declaring Jerusalem the Israeli capital. Well, Lauren Liebman in Jerusalem joins us to break down what we know to date. Oren, share, if you will.
Well, Becky, at this point, we don't know too many details of the plan. This has been, for years now, a very closely guarded secret in Washington by the peace team, even though we know the plan has largely been done for quite some time now. You pointed out that we saw the economic part of it at the Bahrain Economic Workshop, although, truth be told, we haven't heard much about that since that workshop. And now in the coming days, we expect to see the political part of the plan. This, of course, being the far more sensitive part that the Trump administration and its peace team have said would address all of the key issues here: Jerusalem, refugees, borders, and security. What we do expect of the plan, certainly, is that it will be very pro-Israel, the most pro-Israel plan probably that we've ever seen coming from any administration, that it will tick all of the Israelis' boxes and then some, and very few, if any, of the Palestinians' boxes. That's what we expect from it. Rival leader Benny Gantz will have the first meeting on Monday, and then it'll be Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Given that there are very few outside of the White House and the peace team that expect this to succeed, it's worth viewing this from the lens of Israeli domestic politics, and critics say an effort by the White House to try to win an election for Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in a little over a month.
Well, Lauren Liebman in Jerusalem for you. The United Nations recognized Palestinian Liberation Organization denying contact between President Abbas and the White House. Chief PLO negotiator Saeb Erekat is one of six senior Palestinian officials who tell CNN there has been no communication with the United States for 2 years. However, President Trump claims his administration briefly spoke with the Palestinians and will speak with them again, quote, in a period of time. Saeb Erekat joining me now from Jericho in the West Bank. So which is it, sir? Has the US administration, has the Trump administration spoken to the Palestinians or not?
No. Since December 6, 2017, Becky, there has been no contacts whatsoever with the White House or the State Department. As you see, President Trump is busy inviting Netanyahu, Gantz, so the three of them can determine my future. They can decide what's best for me, and they want to dictate on me. Actually, what we hear about Jerusalem being Israel's capital, dropping the refugee issue, security, borders, it cannot even be called the deal of the century. It is the fraud and the hoax of the century. This is the most unfair game we've ever witnessed in international relations. Somebody who's trying to determine my future, my aspiration, my tomorrow, my grandchildren's tomorrow, without even bothering to consult me, because he wants Netanyahu to win the election and he wants to get the Evangelicans to win the elections in 2020?
Okay.
That's the most ridiculous chapter.
Let me put this to you.
In the Middle East peace process.
It is very clear, and Donald Trump's detractors say that the viability of this plan is in doubt if they are only talking to one side and there has been little or no input from the Palestinians. Let me put this to you, sir. The US administration say they are trying to reach out. Should there be a back channel? Should you get word that they are trying to speak to the Palestinians? Would it not be better to interact at this point, to get a seat at the table?
Vicky, we have engaged with the American administration, with President Trump, 37 meetings in 2017. And then I would like to address the President of the United States to say what you're doing is very, very unfair. You go ahead and recognize Jerusalem as Israel's capital. You say settlements are legal. You defund Palestinian UNRWA and institutions and hospitals. And then you say, I want to talk to Palestinians, or maybe in the future, after I decide their future. He is trying to dictate on us. This is a game of fraud and hawks. Palestinians and Israelis need to get re-engaged between themselves.
Let's back up. Let's back up right here. Let's go back for a second to my viewers. I want to show my viewers something real quick. Something that a lot of my viewers don't understand.
WWF.
Hang on. Passed it up. Sorry about that.
Virus.
Hang on.
This has been fully released.
Those that are not familiar with the history of this big conflict, an argument, maybe this will help to clarify something. The big hullabaloo over in the Middle East has always been over a piece of property that that they have been fighting over, pertaining to the Gaza Strip, for quite some times now. And whenever I say quite some times, I'm just not talking about for the past year or two, or even for the past decade or two, but for over 3,000 years. 3,000 years, roughly, that they have been arguing about this piece of property that you're looking at right here, that is about the size of Long Island, called the Gaza Strip right here. This was a mistake that Abraham made in blessing one of his children that he thought was the proper child, but because Abraham was so old and so blind, he basically blessed the wrong child, the wrong person. And because of this, there has been a conflict of interest going on in this country towards people fighting and arguing and bickering and just be at one another's throat, kind of like the Hatfields and McCoys, ever since then. Ever since then. And it needs to stop. There has to be some sort of compromise whenever it comes to the Mosaic law versus the Jerusalem law versus the reality of law, of history law. And it's already been brought out who is right and who is wrong. But those people over there continue to be argumentative in not facing the facts. I don't know if they just like to fight. I don't know if this gives them a reason to fight. But the fact of the matter is, this argument, this disagreement has been going on now for thousands of years. In the name of God, please, let's stop this and let's bring stability and peace to the Middle East. In the name of God, the holy righteous God, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob, the God of the Lord Jesus Christ. In the name of God, let's stop this bickering and fighting and arguing and being at one another's throats. Because it obviously isn't settling and isn't solving nothing for the benefit of the both. Let's stop this. In the name of God, let's stop this. People has to wake up to their foolishness of what that they have been bamboozled off into.
Already did. They have implemented their so-called deal of the century, the hawks of the century, the fraud of the century. This is not going to fly. This is going to push Israelis and Palestinians. They are determining the future of my children and grandchildren and Israeli children and grandchildren to live by the sword. This is unfair. There is another way of peace, solving problems by peaceful means, in accordance with the terms of reference agreed with Palestinians and Israelis in all agreements signed. If President Trump goes with this deal of his, the art of fraud, that means he is canceling all other previous agreements signed and terms of references and international law and international legality. The only solution for Palestinians and Israelis is to live and let live. The state of Palestine with East Jerusalem its capital, to live side by side in peace and security with the state of Israel on the 67 borders. That is the only option. What they're doing now.
A Pakistani wound up taking my first wife away from me. That is still married to this day to the woman that I married down in Memphis, Tennessee. So these are some very, very deep, dark issues that has connected into my life. My son was raised up by Pakistanians that can speak a great deal of their language. This is not something foreign to me. This is something that seeks deep into my heart, and it just makes me it makes me quiver to think that this is all based around a misunderstanding.
Is that undermining this and paving the way to chaos, lawlessness, bloodshed?
Ms. Erica, let me put this to you then. If the deal is rejected outright in this format, as I understand it, Palestinian leadership has suggested it will announce a series of measures to protect what it calls Palestinians' legitimate rights and effectively demand that Israel assume its full responsibilities as, in quotes, an occupying power. Is that how... I'm trying to work out what happens next from your perspective.
What will happen next, Becky, is that there will be an unanimous Arab decision to reject this fraud and this so-called deal.
The Arab Spring is what has brought this all into a conflict to begin with.
And to reiterate our position as Arab countries.
The Arab Spring targeted my family towards taking my first wife away from me.
In unanimity of the two-state solution on the 1967 line, there will be a position similar from the African Union, the European Union, Latin America and the Caribbean, China, Russia, Canada, Japan, and also Asia, and the non-aligned movement and the Organization of Islamic Countries. So I'm afraid at the end of the day, Netanyahu and Trump will stand alone facing the whole international community, which would refuse to engage in solving problems outside the realm and framework of international law and solving problems by peaceful means. Secondly, once they take this step, they would have unilaterally declared the cancellation of the Oslo agreements and all other agreements signed between Israelis and Palestinians. And there is a big chance here that the Palestinian Authority will not be able to sustain such a hit. And Netanyahu will find himself fully in charge and shouldering his responsibility as an occupying power from the River Jordan to the Mediterranean. I'm not threatening. I'm not saying that we dissolve the authority. I'm just saying...
Yes, you are.
If they're gonna
yes, you are. You're threatening. Yes, you are. Don't sit there and lie.
I'm
this guy.
And Netanyahu will find himself fully in charge and shouldering his responsibility as an occupying power from the River Jordan to the Mediterranean. I'm not threatening. I'm not...
Yes, you are.
...saying that we dissolve the authority. I'm just saying if they're going to annex... I'm speaking to you from the Jordan Valley. if they're going to keep me in Jericho and confiscate 94% of the land around me, it means that my 8 grandchildren, Vicky, cannot get married.
It never should have been granted to you to begin with.
Cannot have homes.
It never should have been granted to you to begin with. They can have homes. You're just going to have to work out a different agreement.
That's how dire the situation is for Palestinians.
Yes, it's dire, but it's also dire for Jerusalem.
How can I face these people? This is my constituency. There is a big possibility that with this hit of President Trump and Netanyahu, the Palestinian Authority will be destroyed by Netanyahu, and maybe that's what he wants. Maybe that's what he wants.
Nobody wants to destroy nobody. There's got to be some sort of a compromise. And y'all are the people that don't want to compromise.
They can say, who should I make peace with? The man is facing charges of corruption.
Not the
President of the
time
United States is facing impeachment.
Oh, come on. Get off of that, please. Come on. That is so trivial in you saying that. Come on. Did you really have to go down that low?
And then I have to pay the price with the blood of me, my children and grandchildren.
And what about our blood? What about our blood?
So both of them can get out of the troubles they are in.
I understand this is emotional, and certainly the argument you are putting forward, I have certainly heard before from other sources. Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas has met with the...
Satan, we rebuke you in the name of the Lord Jesus Christ of Nazareth. We rebuke this resistance. We rebuke it in the name of the Lord Jesus Christ of Nazareth. Pray, God, that you will open these people's eyes up, that they will be able to see their errors. Please, God, open their eyes.
The Russian President Vladimir Putin, Britain's Prince Charles, French President Emmanuel Macron, all in the past week. As you understand it, where are the Palestinians' allies at this point? Has this been an effort for President Abbas to find allies ahead of Mr. Trump's peace deal?
I think the Palestinian allies are all those humans who believe in peace between Palestinians and Israelis based in a negotiated settlement, void of violence, that will achieve the state of Palestine with East Jerusalem its capital to live side by side, the state of Israel in peace and security in the 1967.
You've never wanted peace. You've never wanted to compromise. Be honest with yourself. You've never wanted peace.
Borders. President Putin, President Macron, President of Armenia, Prince Charles, everyone on earth had reiterated their positions, and I'm sure after the announcement of President Trump's so-called peace plan, which may be called whatever.
You hadn't even heard it yet. You're already degrading the man.
It is, but will not make peace. I think the whole international community will stand shoulder to shoulder to support those of us who stand tall on the grounds of international law, solving problems by peaceful means, and trying to say that the only option for Palestinians and Israelis is the two-state solution.
The sovereign Israeli law.
Well, it will be fascinating to see where the Europeans stand in all of this. Sir, we don't know exactly when we will get the details of this plan, but it is expected. I thank you for your time ahead of that. Let's talk again once the details are revealed. Sir Erekat. Talk again once the details are revealed. Sir Erekat there from Jericho, Oren Lieberman back in Jerusalem. Oren, break down what you have heard there from the Palestinian side.
Yeah,
the Palestinian rejection of this plan isn't a surprise because we've seen the Palestinians cut off the American administration ever since Trump recognized Jerusalem as the capital of Israel back in 2017 at this point.
Which shows their immaturity, right? Which shows their immaturity.
The question becomes, where do they go from here? The plan is likely also to be rejected by the European Union, by the Arab states, and many others, specifically because it breaks so sharply from what we've seen.
The Arab rise is what has created the controversy.
in the past. That is, mutual land swaps, negotiations based on 1967 lines. It might even depart from the idea of negotiations at all, giving a green light to Israel for unilateral annexation of parts of the West Bank. In that case, it becomes a question of what happens from here. Do European states take action of any sort, whether it's recognize the state of Palestine or something else? Or how does it play out? And that will be a key question here when we look at what's in the plan and when we look at how Israeli leaders and Palestinian leaders react to the plan.
See, they're already cutting this thing completely in half, and the plan hadn't even been exposed yet. They're already chawing at the chops towards what they're going to do before it ever even gets dismissed out into the eyes of the general public to begin with. So they're basically already shooting it out of the saddle before it ever gets out of the gate. And they have continued to be an organization that has been an opposing force from the get-go, going all the way back to the ancient days of despair. All simply because of the I'm just gonna call it like I see it, all because of the works of the devil that is out to kill, steal, and destroy, and is the author of confusion. The empire, the old ancient empire over there, going back into the book of Daniel, is where this all originated from, and that's the very thing that the 4 chapters of Revelations talks about, why God is talking to the 7 churches there pertaining to the Arabic estate of these opposing forces, Balak and Balaam, that even God says that he hates. Balak and Balaam. Study your history. Go back and look at the facts. Quit this. Please stop this aggression.
That's one of the key elements of what we're watching for. The problem is, at this point for the Palestinians, there's little they can do in terms of altering the plan or affecting the plan, and that was obvious in what we heard from Saeb Erekat.
They can cause chaos, they can cause terrorism, they can do everything. These people are out of their minds. And they're not wanting peace. They ain't never wanted peace. All they want to do is stir up strife and confusion and wrath.
So they have to wait and see what happens here, and that means in terms of their actions.
They targeted my family.
Their options, there aren't really any good ones, and it's a question of what they can do in response and who they can rally to their side. So when it does come out, not only are we looking for what the Palestinians have to say, which I think at this point is quite obvious, but where do the reactions come from elsewhere? Is this just a tepid response? Or a tepid rejection from the Arab states, or is there a much stronger response from the Arab states and from the Europeans, and in what form does that come?
Oren Liebman in Jerusalem, great to have you on.
Probably in an aftermarket or generic form. It won't be real. It won't be sincere. Not too long ago, I went down to Memphis and spoke to my ex-wife down there pertaining to some issues of the past. While I was in there, her married husband, her Pakistani husband, come in the room, and it was all that I could do was to hold my peace in his own house in regards to me unloading on him and his people back home. So, these are old blood grudges that goes way back over a misunderstanding of Abraham, Isaac, and the rest of them towards a big disagreement of this Arabic Spring that occurred, that we're now today still having to deal with. And that's the reason why God is speaking to the churches that he hates them people that are under this type of rule, are under this type of demonic force, this demonic environment, Balak and Balaam.
Lauren, we will be speaking again in the next couple of days.
This was back whenever the hand was writing on the wall in the book of Daniel. The book of Daniel coming to an existence, give or take about 700-800 years BC before Christ. And it was all in regard to the empire over there that was causing so much havoc. You keep in mind, whenever Jesus walked and talked amongst us, he had to walk and talk amongst that era, in that area, around those folks. He had to be right up amongst them. He was rubbing shoulders with them. He knowed what kind of people that he was being reared up around over there in the ancient Egypt era or area. He knowed. That's the reason why Jesus said that whenever you shall see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet, to know that the end is nigh. That is one of the final signs that Jesus said, that you will know that we are at the doors, we are at the gate, we are at the end time, is whenever that you shall see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet.
As and when we get the details of what is being touted, or vaunted at least, by the Trump administration as a deal of the century.
Boy, oh boy. That makes my blood boil. And I know it shouldn't. As a Christian, I know I should be forgiving. But to sit here and watch the onslaught of so many innocent lives that has been destroyed,
people,
it goes beyond comprehension. It goes beyond anything that I can ever even begin to fathom.
The coronavirus outbreak has some 57 million people under lockdown. More than a dozen Chinese cities are now got transport restrictions of one form or another. International flights and travel plans have been cancelled, and Chinese officials are warning that people can pass along the virus even if they don't have the symptoms. Well, those 15 some cities are considered pretty small by Chinese standards, but 57 million people, by many counts, is bigger than the population of the UAE, Bahrain, Kuwait, Oman, Qatar, and Saudi Arabia put together. Just think about that. And China going full speed ahead on its response. Wuhan building 2 brand new hospitals, one in just 6 days, and the other promised in 15. One hospital will hold 1,300 beds dedicated to patients with symptoms of the coronavirus. Officials say the design plan will be released Friday and construction will start soon after that. You can see how busy they are there laying the groundwork at the site. It sits on the outskirts of Wuhan and is expected to be complete and operating by February the 3rd. Does seem absolutely remarkable, doesn't it? CNN's David Culver, who was recently in Wuhan, spoke to an American now stuck inside. Have a listen to this.
I woke up feeling quite desperate, sad, angry. Most of this is because of a lack of information and a lack of knowing what's going on. My mother's worried about me. I love her. She's 88 years old. My sister let her know that things I'm doing here. And I don't want her to worry anymore. And I'd like to see her.
Well, the World Health Organization yet to declare an international public health crisis, and it has been criticized by some. The organization says while this outbreak is an emergency in China, it has not yet become a global health emergency. The WHO says to be a global health emergency, it would have to involve a public health risk to other states through the international spread of disease that may require a coordinated international response. Well, it does seem, on the surface at least, that the Wuhan coronavirus has already met that standard. WHO spokesman Tarek Jazarevich joins us now to help clarify. And so when you look at the map and see where these confirmed cases are across the world, why is it that your organization hasn't yet declared a public health emergency?
Well, the recommendation has been made by emergency committee that is a group of independent experts. And as the Director General said, and you just mentioned it, it is clearly an emergency in China, and we have seen cases in other countries. Obviously, we are monitoring situation. Emergency committee may be reconvened at any time on a very short notice. What is really important to say is that declaring public health emergency does not mean that we start working. We have been in contact with the Chinese health authorities from the day one of this outbreak, and we've been working with a group of scientists around the world trying to understand this virus, and we have issued a set of guidance 10 days after the virus has been reported for the first time.
Let's be very clear, because by declaring a public health emergency, that does allow people to take appropriate actions in response to the emergency, consistent with other authorities, and I'm quoting here, including making grants, entering into contracts, conducting and supporting investigations into the cause, treatment, or prevention of the disease or disorder. None of this will be unfamiliar to you. So I put it to you again, do you expect, should we expect to see or hear in the coming hours the declaration of a global health emergency?
We are monitoring the situation. Really, everyone is at work right now, trying to get to the bottom of what the virus really is. I think what is important is to understand how easily it is being transmitted between humans. It is important to understand what's the severity of it and also what is the source. At the same time, we want public health authorities around the world to be on alert and level their preparedness to the point that they can quickly treat, they can test, and they can provide care for those who are sick. All of this is already happening, and we may reconvene an emergency committee, but again, the work is being done, and it's really a race against time to try to understand the virus, at the same time providing the right information to the public. As your viewer who just called in from Wuhan said, we need to have this information to people so they know first what's the situation, and secondly what they need to do. And really what's most important is that people who are sick, people who feel that they have coughing, they have a problem with breathing, they should not travel, they should go and seek medical assistance.
Exactly.
China's being criticized for this mass lockdown creating panic. I wonder what lessons the WHO has learned from the past about the balance between getting the right information out there and the proper declarations made, but not inciting more worry than necessary. Briefly, sir.
Well, it is important, it's crucial to provide right information to the population in a timely manner and also what they should be doing. Now, when it comes to the measures, every country will introduce measures that they seem appropriate for their context and based on their analysis. It is difficult to find that balance between introducing measures that will benefit public health and disrupting the social life. And this is something that China is really trying to do right now.
And with that, we're going to leave it there. We thank you very much indeed for joining us. Busy times at the WHO. Thank you, sir. The outbreak of this virus has spooked financial markets as well. One analyst warns CNN the travel bans will have a major impact on the Chinese economy. Some are calling for at least a 1 percentage point hit on the Chinese GDP this quarter. Well, over 600 people have been killed in Iraq since protests there began in October. Those are official numbers. The UN calling the steps taken to quieten the unrest hollow. That is just ahead.
Looking for vacation rentals?
That'll be it for today on this particular segment coming from the Windmill Ministries here at 291 Thompson Road. It is sad of what the world is facing simply because of a group of people that thought that either I was joking or chose voluntarily towards not wanting to support a ministry that supported peace. It is absolutely profoundly sad in what the world is fixing to have to face off on because of such rebelliousness, adversity. Good luck to all of us, and shalom. Good luck to each and every one of us. So sad. Looks like the exact same thing that it has showed like twice.
But it does seem, on the surface at least, that the
So sad. There's got to be panic, concern. There's got to be turmoil amongst families and people that's living in an environment like that.
But what he didn't say is that these demonstrations are also about the continuing involvement of Iran, his close friend and ally neighboring Iran in Iraq. And that aspect of these demonstrations won't go away. And there has always been, since the very beginning of these demonstrations, a very strong sense on the street.
Do you see what I'm saying whenever I look at what I'm looking at and I'm like, wow, these events is all the opposite of peace and utopia. The very thing that Ronald Reagan talked about towards Gorbachev, tear down that wall, in the events of ending the Cold War era in the late 80s that now has escalated into what has escalated into today. Total chaos. Between this, the diseases, the divorces, all the abortions here in America, 2.3 incarcerated in prisoners, either in federal prisoners or inmates in jail, $23 trillion in debt, all the other problems above. All these occurrences is going in the opposite direction of peace and utopia.
When I was there,
I'm talking about in the total opposite direction. And it's going on all over the world. There's very few spots on the planet that is not going through some sort of chaotic moment right now.
Element in this process.
It's a heartbreak.
anger. We saw the resignation of the Prime Minister Saad Hariri, of course, 2 weeks after the anti-corruption protest began. Now with a new government and no end in sight for demonstrations, it does seem this too is becoming an even deeper crisis. When I say we've, certainly saw echoes of Iraq in Lebanon and Lebanon in Iraq, perhaps it would be wrong to say that they mirror.
The world has become bipolar. The weather has become bipolar. Up and down, off and on. Hurry up and wait. To the far right, to the far left. The planet has become bipolar. They're out there with tennis shoes on. They don't have boots. They got tennis shoes on. Holding a police shield. You seeing this? These aren't experts. Lord, Lord. What is the planet becoming of?
Iran has influence. The influence in the Lebanon is largely, almost entirely through Hezbollah, which is both a military organization and a political organization, and an important political organization in the very delicate constitutional sectarian construct that is modern Lebanon. Now, the interesting thing about these demonstrations, you were there yourself, is that they're against that kind of formula of government, not least because
these upheavals that are happening all over the planet. My question is this: where is all this leading to?
it actually moment kind of beyond the influence of certainly of a government as impoverished as Iran. They're reaching out. They had a meeting yesterday with the finance minister and the International Monetary Fund. The sorts of reforms that the IMF is likely to demand of Lebanon would cripple the system of patronage. It would make corruption extremely difficult, and it would make the Lebanese poor. And that is something, and they've just had to issue a reassurance to foreign people of owning foreign debt that there won't be effectively a run on the banks. But Lebanon's middle classes have been very, very badly hit by these years now of mismanagement. They've run out of cash. Getting that country back on track, getting rid of the influence, of the malign influence of drug dealers, black marketeers, money launderers have been washing their stuff through Beirut for decades now, is going to be extremely difficult. But that is the only route that they're going to be able to take if they go for IMF-style reforms. I should also put a rider on that. Those kind of reforms have not worked well in the rest of the world, not least in Africa, in my experience.
It was some 11 billion that they were holding out for before these protests began. Of course, they felt like that might at least stem the.
I've had enough. I think my viewers has had enough. Good luck to all of us. Shalom.